Today I'm going to show you how to extract the Firewall USF file. But before we do that, I want to show you what I'm running. This is my system. So you can see I'm running Windows 7 and I'm running with 28 gig on a 64-bit operating system. Now the first thing we need to do after we download the Firewall is to extract it. So I'm going to extract everything here. Now once I've extracted the Firewall, what we'll find is that we'll have these files. So the next thing I need to do is I need to go into VMware Player, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a virtual machine. The virtual machine that I'm going to open is in Downloads, USF. This is where I just extracted a file, and this is the file I want to extract. So we're going to create a new OpenSense firewall. And I'm letting it run so you can see the performance, so you can judge what your system does compared to mine. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to look at my IP addresses. So I do ipconfig, and we can see here that for my system I have an Ethernet adapter, and it's at 192.168.1.6, and I have a VMnet 1 adapter, and it's at 192.168.80.1. So what I'm going to do is my firewall is going to be at 192.168.80.2 for the LAN, and for the WAN it's going to be at 192.168.1 dot something that the DHCP server is going to give me. Now that's important to understand. So when we go in here, what we want to do is we want to edit our virtual machine, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that everything is set up correctly. And what I'm going to do is use bridge mode. I'm going to replicate the physical adapter. I'm going to configure it to only use my Ethernet connection. The next thing is for my second adapter, I want to make sure that I use the customized adapter, which was that VMnet 1. That's the one that we just saw here. VMnet 1 at this address. So that'll set this interface up correctly. Now that I've done that, the next thing I'm going to do is just start my virtual player. You'll get a message that says you have additional devices. Just ignore that. And as you can see, it takes a while to come up, even if I have 28 gig. Notice that this is the longest process here. You may think that your system's slow. Indeed, it's not. What's happening is this is just timing out on the network, and that's confused a lot of students. They think, oh, my system isn't good enough. So you see this is taking a very long time, and that's because it's trying to connect to the internet and get a DHCP address, and of course it's timing out, so it's just waiting. You may think your system's too slow, but it isn't. It's just that this process is in a timeout mode. As soon as it doesn't have the response that it wants, it will continue. And you can see here how we found one interface, even though it's not the right one. So what we need to do is log in using root, OpenSense, open since it's all one word, and notice that it doesn't echo across the screen. And now I've logged in, and what I need to do is I need to assign my adapters, so I'm going to say 1, and I'm going to manually assign these adapters. I don't want any VLANs, and I have 2 interfaces, as you can see, and they're incorrect. And you can see that I have 2 adapters, EM0 and LE0. And I'm just going to put this, remind me about the tools later. I have no VLANs. I'm going to try to auto detect. And I'm just going to hit enter. And you can see that I'm just going to enter the WAN interface name. And I'm going to enter the LAN interface name, which is LE0. And I don't have an optional interface, so I'm just going to hit return. And you can see here where I configured my WAN to be EM0 and my LAN to be LE0. I'm going to continue. It's going to try to automatically configure here. And again, it will take some time to reload. And there we go. And you can see that I got a DHCP address. So that's really good. But you can see for LAN, I did not get an address. And that's because there's no DHCP server here. So what I need to do then is I need to go and configure this. And how I do that is by option 2. And I'm going to say I want to configure LAN, which is a 2. And now I'm going to enter the IP address. And remember, the IP address is the IP address that I obtained down here on VMnet 1, which is 192.168.80. And I'm going to make it a 2 because we know 1's taken. And this is a /24-bit. You can see that because this right here is the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and that is a /24 CIDR address. And we don't have an upstream gateway, so I don't have to worry about that. I don't want to do anything with IPv6. And I could configure our DHCP server now, but I'm going to wait and do it inside of the web. And again, that's one of our exercises, so I'm not going to configure it here. And I don't want to do the web converter. So now it's going to reload. And you see here where it tells me that now I can connect to my interface on 192.168.80.2. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into the shell. Now the shell allows me to do a number of commands. The commands that I generally use are ls for list, and that lists the directory, mkdir, which is make directory. I'm just going to make a directory called data. Now if I do an ls, what you see is I have a data directory. Now if I do an ls-long, you can see that it'll list the different properties of the directory. I can do a cd to data in an ls, and you can see there's nothing in there. Now if I wanted to create a file, what I would do then was I could cat it, which is cat. Actually, let me go back up. Let me cat my login. And this will just type out the file. That's another useful command. Now again, we can, if we want to look at the root is ls with a /. And this is the root directory. If I want to know where I am, I use pwd, and you can see I'm at root. So this is the directory that I logged into, and the reason why I'm in here is because I used the root account to get here. Now that being said, the thing we want to do, if you want to ping 192.168.80.1, which is our host address, and you can see I can reach it. You use a Control-C to get out of there. And now let's go over to my DOS box, and I'm going to ping 192.168.80.2, which is my firewall. And you can see that I can reach that. So now all I need to do is go here. Is that a new one? And I'm going to connect to HTTP 192.168.80.2. And after waiting a little bit, it's going to tell me that system did not have a certificate that we recognize. I'm going to continue anyways. And now I'm at OpenSense. So I'm going to use my root account. I'm going to use my OpenSense password. And sometimes you'll get this if you're using IE. I do not want to debug. And this is my initial configuration. And the wizard will guide me through. This is my host name, my local domain. And I'm not going to set up any DNS servers or anything like that yet. If I wanted to set up a time server, I could do it here. If I want to use DHCP, I can do it here. This is my LAN address. And I'm just going to keep this at OpenSense. And now we're just going to reload. So this is how we install. You can see now that we have the dashboard and everything's all set up. So this is how we set up the OpenSense firewall. And again, the part that you're going to do predominantly is the part that we just looked at, which was here. And what we did was we had to go in, assign the adapters, and we had to go in and configure the IP addresses. That turns out to be the hardest part. Once you get past that, everything else is pretty easy. Now, when we go through the assignments, what you're going to see is we're going to have services, and we're going to want to run a DHCP server. This is going to be on the LAN. We're going to enable our DHCP server on the LAN. We're going to make sure that we have our subnet, which is 192.168.80. We're going to have a subnet mask, which is our CIDR 24 subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. We can have a range of addresses, and I like to shorten this down a little bit, and I like to use addresses like 32 to 64, knowing that I don't have many systems on my LAN. Later on, we're going to configure the gateway and everything else. Right now, we're not going to do that, but in our firewall lab that you'll get in Module 11, you'll do that type of configuration. And I'm just going to save this. And there you go. The next thing we're going to want to do is we want to go to System Settings. And what we want to do here is for admin access, we want to enable our secure shell. We want to allow root users to log in, and we want to allow the use of passwords. Again, generally we wouldn't do this in the real world, but we're going to do this for our lab exercises because it just makes it simple. Now that you've done that, you're ready to do the rest of the exercises that you'll find. Again, we have exercises that will allow us to do encryption and decryption. You'll need Putty, which is an SSL tool that allows us to connect remotely from a system to the firewall. And that's what that SSL is all about. That's what we did here. Now, what's confusing to some people is that we're using the secure shell, but when we're using it through the PC, it's called Putty. And we're also going to use a secure copy, which is called SCP on Linux, but it's called PSCP on Windows. So now you should have a good idea on how to set up your firewall and how you would enable secure login and DHCP services. So now that we can ping the firewall, and again, this is the proof that we can ping the firewall, what I want to do is I want to look at a couple of executables that I'll be using. And those executables are PSCP and Putty. And what I'm going to do is I downloaded them to this directory, but I'm also going to copy them to my Windows directory, System32. Now notice here that I'm an administrator command prompt. That allows me to copy into this directory, otherwise I would not be able to. Now why am I doing this? Why am I copying these files? Well, it turns out that I'll use these a lot. So because I'm going to use them a lot, I'm going to want to be able to reference them anywhere that I am. And that really makes it nice and easy. Generally what would happen would be I would have to specify the path and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that they run wherever I am. So I'm going to go to USF, and what we have here is we have my OVF. And what I want to do is I just need some kind of file to copy, just to show you how to copy files. So I'm going to go here, and there is a manifest file, and that's what this is right here, manifest. And I'm just going to copy that up. So how do I do this? Well, the first thing is I have to run Putty, and again, Putty is remote shell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify what the IP address is. Now I already have it defined, but just to show you how this should work, I'm going to do it here. So I specify the address, and then what I want to do is I'm going to just say that this is my test firewall. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. So now that I saved this test firewall, next time I come in here, all I have to do is load it and then open it. And notice I get this security alert. This is the fingerprint from the firewall, and I have to accept it. This is going to install this certificate onto my system, so I won't be prompted to do that again. And then finally I'm going to go to root, OpenSense, and now I'm logged in. Now notice this looks a lot like my console here. They're exactly the same thing. So some of you have already said, I really don't like the font on this and things like that. Well, you can actually adjust that to Putty. So if you wanted to use Putty as your console, you could do that easily. So the next thing I want to do then is I want to show you yet another application. Oh, and notice that I have now two open, well, I guess I don't have two open sessions. Let me open this one as well. So notice I have two open sessions now, and they're displaying exactly the same thing. Control-Alt got me out of this window, so I can go over here. And here we go. I have Putty up and running, and I have my OpenSense console inside of VMware up and running. And you can see what the difference in fonts are. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to go here, and I want to do a directory. The hardest part is actually going between Windows and Linux. You're going to do a directory on Windows, and you're going to do a list or ls on Linux. It gets a little confusing, but you know, if you keep on working with these two systems, you'll get used to it. So what I want to do now is I'm going to copy the OpenSense firewall manifest file, and I'm going to copy it to root at 192.168.
80.2, and I'm going to put it in my data directory. Now, what is my data directory? Well, if we come over here, or actually maybe I should use Putty because that's what I'm showing you how to use here. So if we come over here and I use a selection of 8, it brings me into the shell. If I use an ls, it'll show that I created that directory data, and if I do an ls of data, it'll show that nothing's in there. So what I want to do here then is I want to copy my OVF manifest file into data. And notice that it asks for a password, again, open sense, and it copies the file. So when I come over here then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list data again. And you can use up arrow, so I'm going to do it this way first. I typed it. Or I can use the up arrow and it automatically will do it. Either way, you can see that I have that manifest file. I'm going to cd to data, and again, this is the directory. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy it to a new name. And the name I'm going to copy it to, there also is autocomplete. So if I just type the first part of a word and hit tab, it'll autocomplete the file name. I'm going to create a test manifest file. Now if we do a list, you can see that I have 2 files. And if I do a list long, you can see that they are exactly the same file because they're the same size and things like that. So now what do I need to do is I need to go over here, and what I want to do now is I want to copy that file, that test MF file, back to my host system. And again, this will show you both ways of copying up to the firewall and copying back down. So to do that, I'm going to use PSCP, and this time I'm going to specify root 192.168.80.2 colon period / data / test .mf, and notice I'm putting a period here. What this is doing is it's saying copy the file named test.mf and copy it to this directory. That's what the period means, this directory, using the same file name. So it's going to prompt for a password. It copies the file. I told you were going to do this. I did a list instead of a directory because I'm on Windows now, and there's the file. Now I can type out this file, and this file will show me exactly the same information. Again, this is just a hash to make sure that the OVF was correct. On the Linux side, I can do a cat of that file, and you can see that it's the same file. So with this, you're now able to do the encryption decryption assignment.